They fined me $900 for a goat my daughter rescued from a ditch, then sent 3 armed inspectors to our ranch to seize it. 42 minutes later, they were the ones in handcuffs. I'll tell you how that happened. Welcome to HOA Story. My name's Caleb Mercer, from Denton County, Texas. Civil engineer by trade, father by purpose. If you've ever been pushed by a board that forgot who it serves, you're in the right place. I share real stories of accountability and recovery. Subscribe if you believe sunlight still fixes things. And tell me, where are you watching from? I never wanted to be that guy fighting an HOA. I built our ranch house on 5 acres of scrubland that used to belong to my granddad. My wife Dana wanted open space and quiet. Our daughter Lily wanted animals. After my dad died in 2019, I promised I'd keep one corner of his land open for rescues. That promise was the only reason I didn't sell the parcel when the developer came knocking. The HOA formed later, 9 members, half of them real estate investors who never lived here. At first it was small things. New mailbox standards, paint color approvals, a mandatory beautification fee that ballooned from $75 to $260 per quarter. Then came the notice about unauthorized livestock. It wasn't livestock. It was a 6-month-old goat with a busted leg Lily named Clover. I called the HOA office. The manager, a smug man named Ron Bixby, said, "You signed the covenants. Animals of that type aren't permitted." I told him Clover wasn't of that type. She was therapy for my kid who'd stopped sleeping since Granddad's funeral. He laughed and said, "Then get her a goldfish." 2 days later, I found an orange violation tag nailed to our gate. Removal required within 72 hours or daily fines of $300. I started reading the bylaws that night. Section 4.2 listed commercial livestock. Section 4.3 exempted temporary rescue or rehabilitation not exceeding 90 days. Clover had been with us for 41. I printed the clause, circled it, and sent it certified mail to their P.O. box. No reply. Instead, a second letter arrived with a notice of escalation and the line, "Board inspection scheduled for May 17th at 9:00 a.m. I waited on the porch that morning. 3 men in yellow shirts marked HOA inspections rolled up in a black SUV. No license plates. They weren't inspectors. One had a sidearm in a thigh holster. The smallest one said, "We'll just grab the animal and be on our way." I told him, "Grab her and you die on my property." That line spread faster than fire in summer grass once the deputy body cam hit the web. But before that happened, the fear was real. I didn't know who they were or what authority they claimed. I called 911, then my neighbor Janelle, a retired county clerk who'd seen plenty of shady filings in her time. She arrived 10 minutes later in her golf cart, holding a binder like a weapon. "Caleb, these jokers filed an inspection right of entry form with the subdivision permit, but the county never ratified it," she said. "It's unenforceable off common grounds." That was the first crack in their armor. But I needed proof. Hard proof, not just a retired clerk's memory. I wanted paper and numbers. Knowledge nugget number 1. In Texas, an HOA's inspection rights stop at the property line unless the owner expressly grants access in writing or by recorded covenant. Anything beyond that is trespass, even if the board votes on it. That night, I pulled the plat maps, deed history, and every addendum I'd signed when closing the mortgage. The inspection clause they cited didn't exist. What I did find was a utility easement recorded in 2008 that gave the original developer access to maintain the shared well system, but only along the western fence line. I traced signatures, Developers LLC, dissolved in 2013. Successor entity, dormant since 2017. The HOA had no active rights over that easement. In plain English, they'd been bluffing with expired paper. Still, bluff or not, they'd shown up armed. Dana wanted to move. Lily cried herself to sleep clutching Clover. I told them both I'd handle it. I didn't say how, because I didn't know yet. The next morning, Janelle handed me a folder thick with photocopies and sticky notes. "You're going to need allies," she said. "Start with someone who knows insurance or real estate law. These boards only understand liability." That's when I called Victor Tran, a municipal attorney I'd met during a drainage survey contract. Victor drank from a dented thermos labeled City Fuel and talked like every sentence needed a citation. He read the violation letters, raised an eyebrow, and said, "They're impersonating enforcement personnel. That's criminal impersonation under Penal Code 37.12. I stared at the line item where he'd underlined the penalty, up to 1 year, $4,000 fine. "So what do we do?" I asked. He grinned. "We let them keep talking. People who think they're the law usually hang themselves with their own rope." Victor's grin wasn't smug. It was surgical. He took a slow sip from his thermos and said, "You keep everything. Dates, times, license plates if you can, and never let anger write your emails." So I started a binder. 3 rings, hard spine, labeled Ranch Citations Log. I wrote each entry like an engineer logging a failure. May 17th, 09:04 a.m. 3 subjects, no badges, yellow HOA shirts, 1 visible firearm. Dialed 911. Deputy arrived, 09:19 a.m. Confirmed no lawful warrant. The deputy, Morales, was young but by the book. He told them, "Step off the property. You can talk from the road." They didn't like that. One spat near my boots. Morales took their IDs, ready tours, Iowa dispatch, and 5 minutes later, 2 unmarked SUVs rolled up. Federal. I'd learn later that one of the HOA's inspectors had an old security contract license suspended for impersonation. Dana stood behind the porch rail holding Lily's shoulder, whispering, "It's going to be okay." I wanted to believe her, but that afternoon, my phone pinged with a HOA group post headline. Mercer family defies community rules. Animal control notified. The harassment had gone public. By sunset, half the neighborhood Facebook comments read like a smear campaign. "If we let one rancher keep goats, next it'll be pigs. He's threatening volunteers with a gun." None of it true. I screenshotted every comment, date-stamped them, stored them on a thumb drive labeled Online Activity, Exhibit C. 2 nights later, my neighbor Janelle dropped by again, bringing peach cobbler and a flash drive. "It's the insurance filing," she said. "They're insured through Heritage Mutual. Policy number 4217B. Clause 19 requires them to report incidents involving impersonation or violence within 24 hours, or coverage lapses." That was the first time I felt the faint hum of leverage forming. But I said nothing. Instead, I emailed Victor. "Need discreet lookup on Heritage Mutual, 4217B. Possible non-disclosure breach." He called 5 minutes later. "You're learning fast, cowboy." Before I tell you what we found, let me ask, are you firmly anti-HOA or just anti-abuse? If you've faced a board that overstepped, drop one tactic below that helped you stand your ground. And if you haven't yet, maybe leave a message for the HOA lurkers reading these comments. Victor's research came back 2 days later. Heritage Mutual won't confirm, but they show an open investigation. If your footage or deputy report surfaces, their premiums triple. So, keep your cool, keep your files. The next morning, an envelope arrived. Final notice before Lien. They claimed I owed $4,200 in accumulated fines and administrative costs. Dana cried when she saw it. "They'll take our home," she said. I put the letter in a plastic sleeve. Not without math, they won't. I logged into the county recorder's site, cross-checked their authority to place liens. Section 209-0092 required judicial filing for any amount over $2,500 and 30-day written notice of intent. They'd skipped both. Illegal on its face. Knowledge nugget number 2, Texas Property Code, Bar 209-0092, mandates a verified lien filing process. Skipping the notice voids the lien and exposes the board to statutory damages and attorney's fees. Still, they kept pushing. 3 more violation tags by the end of the week: trash can visibility, fence stain tone, unauthorized animal sound disturbance. It was absurd. I recorded each one, printed high-res photos of Clover sleeping under the oak, decibel readings from a phone app, 38 dE. Quieter than my truck idling. Then came the email from Ron. "Caleb, the board voted 6-3 to authorize property inspection with law enforcement support if you continue to obstruct compliance." I replied one line. "Please cite the statute granting that authority." He never did. The dig had turned into a trench war of documents. Janelle became my field marshal. She brewed coffee in mason jars and muttered, "Paper beats people when the people lie." We pulled every meeting minute from the last 2 years, found inconsistencies, budget votes taken without quorum, proxy forms with identical handwriting, consulting fees paid to Bixby Management LLC, Ron's own company. Classic self-dealing. Victor warned me, "That's the kind of thing that ends careers. Don't show your hand yet." I didn't. But I started drafting something, a quiet corporate instrument that would later become my first reversal. By June 3rd, the HOA held an emergency session regarding ongoing non-compliance. I attended with my phone in record mode, Texas being a one-party consent state. When Ron saw me filming, he smirked. "Mr. Mercer, you can't record a private HOA meeting." "It's not private," I said. "Your own bylaws call for open attendance of all homeowners." He leaned closer. "We can change that." That line stuck like grit in my teeth. Late that night, I drafted a purchase offer through an anonymous LLC for a tiny, overlooked asset, the Western Utility Strip, 8 feet wide, 180 feet long, recorded separately from my parcel but never merged into the common area. Price, $1,100. Seller, the dissolved developer's estate, whose executor owed back taxes. Knowledge nugget number 3. In common interest communities, if a parcel isn't deeded to the association, its owner controls any easement rights tied to it, even if the HOA believes otherwise. I signed the offer. Victor notarized it. By the end of the week, my LLC, Westline Holdings, owned the access strip that every water and electrical line for the subdivision crossed. I said nothing to anyone. Instead, I kept documenting. I wanted them to keep walking right into it. By the second week of June, they'd walked in so deep they didn't even see the pit. Every notice, every fine, every posturing email went into my binder like nails in their own coffin. I was calm on the outside, still mowing my lawn to exact regulation height, still waving to neighbors. But inside I was measuring every move in feet, days, and statute numbers. Victor called it building the invisible wall. He said, "Don't give them an excuse to call you hostile. Let the paper fight for you." So I did. The board posted a new update on the HOA portal. Mercer remains non-compliant. Board to initiate code enforcement coordination. I read that and smiled. They just crossed the line. From civil nuisance to regulatory impersonation. Code enforcement is municipal. They had zero jurisdiction. Still, their tactics turned nastier. Unmarked trucks idled outside at night. Once, a noise complaint brought a county deputy who apologized after hearing nothing but frogs and cicadas. Dana started sleeping with the porch light on. That's when I installed my own camera system. 12 units, motion activated, recording straight to a cloud drive with timestamps. If they so much as sneezed on the fence line, I'd have it. But here's what I learned quickly about bullies in polo shirts. They hate being ignored. So Ron upped the ante. He mailed a glossy newsletter titled, "Protecting Our Standards." In it, a section labeled Enforcement Actions featured my address, publicly printed, and a quote, "Some homeowners refuse to respect the community image." That was it. Line crossed. Defamation on paper. I took the newsletter to Victor's office. He flipped through it, circled my address, and said, "They just turned this from a nuisance case into tortious exposure, and you, my friend, now hold both the sword and the shield." I laughed, but there wasn't much joy in it. "I don't want to sue them. I want them stopped." He nodded. "Then you let the process make the point. Keep the leverage quiet." I did, for 24 days. During that stretch, I noticed the HOA held their summer social at the clubhouse, a property technically serviced by the same Western Utility Strip I now owned through Westline Holdings LLC. That meant every watt of power and every drop of water for their event was flowing under my ground rights. That image stuck in my mind like a slow fuse burning toward the first reversal. But before we get there, let me ask you something real. How far should an HOA's control reach? Past your porch? Into your lawn? Into your kid's therapy pet? Where's the line? Tell me below, because too many boards think that line moves when they say so. A week later, Bixby sent another threat. Failure to settle your balance will trigger legal referral by June 30th. I looked at the date and realized it lined up perfectly with their next quarterly meeting. That's when I decided to make my first move. I drove out to the county recorder's office with Victor and Janelle. We recorded a Notice of Ownership and Easement Control for Parcel 18B, cross-referencing the subdivision plat. Filed at 9:41 a.m. Date stamped, sealed. Public record. Visual beat number 1 burned into memory. That red ink stamp hitting the counter. Crisp and final. On the drive back, Victor said quietly, "You just became the landlord of their lifeline." "Yeah," I said. "Now we wait." Waiting wasn't easy. The harassment continued. Trash cans mysteriously overturned, my mailbox dented, someone poured something sticky in the key slot. Each time I filed a police report, logged photos, and added them to the binder. Ranch citations. Log, Volume 2. Then, on June 29th at 8:32 p.m., Ron himself showed up at the gate with 2 board members. He was sweating through his yellow HOA management shirt, waving a clipboard. "This is your last warning, Mercer," he barked. "Tomorrow we file the lien. Monday, we'll start the foreclosure process. You'll wish you'd complied." I asked, "You filed your corporate annual report this year, Ron?" He blinked. "What?" "Just wondering. Secretary of State site says your HOA entity's status is delinquent. Forfeited rights." That shook him for a second. He muttered, "We're fixing that." I leaned on the gate. "You might want to fix it fast, because technically right now, your HOA doesn't legally exist. And if it doesn't exist, none of your fines exist either." He sputtered. "You think this scares me?" "Not yet," I said. "But it will." When they left, Dana came out, rubbing her eyes. "Was that really necessary?" "Yeah," I said, "because now I know what they'll do next, and it's exactly what I need them to do." At dawn, I emailed Victor and Janelle. Stage 1 complete. They'll file anyway. Let them. By July 3rd, the HOA tried to record their lien, except the county clerk flagged it. Invalid corporate status, missing notice certification, non-signing officer. The filing bounced, rejected on public record. I didn't celebrate. I just printed the rejection notice, slipped it into the binder behind a red tab labeled, "Countdown Begins." They didn't know yet, but that clock was ticking toward the standoff that would put their own hubris on display for the FBI, the news, and the rest of our once quiet neighborhood. By early July, they were trapped in their own web. Ron didn't even realize it yet, but every time he threatened me, he built my case stronger. Each recorded call, each certified letter, they were adding stones to their own wall. Then came the 4th of July weekend, and I'll never forget the sound. The sprinkler hiss died across every lawn in the subdivision at exactly 10:12 a.m. Fireworks stands half loaded with dry grass, kids trying to fill pools with hoses that coughed air. Someone had cut the water. Within minutes, the HOA group chat was chaos. "Anyone else have low pressure? Ron, what's going on? City says it's not them." It wasn't. It was me. Well, technically, it was the automatic shutoff valve inside the service box on my new 8-foot parcel, the one they never knew they didn't control. I'd warned no one. It wasn't sabotage, it was maintenance. The original deed allowed temporary suspension for repair or inspection. That phrase was my shield. An hour later, my phone rang. Ron's number. I let it go to voicemail. "Caleb, whatever stunt you're pulling, turn the water back on. You're endangering the community." I waited 3 more hours before replying. "I'm conducting inspection and maintenance as per recorded rights under Parcel 18B. Service will resume upon completion." The silence that followed was worth the months of restraint. That night, Janelle came by grinning. "He called an emergency board session. He's panicking." Victor texted minutes later. "Perfect. They'll expose themselves if they try to bypass your authority." And they did. By dawn, HOA board members were out there with flashlights and bolt cutters trying to pry open the utility box. My cameras caught it all. Timestamps, faces, and even the sound of Ron saying, "I don't care who owns it. It's ours by necessity." That recording would become Exhibit A in what happened next. But before we roll forward, tell me, what's your take? Should a homeowner be able to control an easement parcel if the HOA failed to secure it? Or should the board automatically inherit those rights? I'm curious how many of you would fight it out like I did. By July 7th, Victor filed a notice of trespass and unauthorized entry with the county sheriff's office. I didn't press charges, yet. I wanted a neutral authority to log the event. Deputy Morales returned, recognized the same faces, and warned them. Next time you cut a lock that isn't yours, it's criminal. They slunk away, furious. Ron tried to counter with a mass email. Homeowner interference caused temporary service disruption. Board considering legal action. I replied to all, attaching the property record link that showed Westline Holdings LLC, owner of parcel 18B. I wrote one line, "Facts are free." Within an hour, my phone buzzed with messages from neighbors. "Wait, you own the utility lot?" Ron said the developer gave that to HOA. "Nope," I replied. "Developer never transferred it. Check the registry." And just like that, the tide started to shift. The harassment didn't stop, though. It got personal. One morning, Lily's bike tires were slashed. The next, a wellness check visit showed up at our door after an anonymous complaint. The deputy apologized again. "They said your daughter was living with unsafe animals," he muttered. That was the lowest point. Dana cried in the kitchen, saying, "This isn't about goats anymore. They want to break us." I looked at Clover out in the yard, her healed leg twitching while she napped under the oak. "No," I said. "They're about to break themselves." I set up my own camera facing the front gate, and this time I added signage. 24-hour recording. State one-party consent in effect. Perfectly legal, thanks to Victor's memo. Knowledge nugget number 4. In Texas, you may lawfully record any conversation you're a party to without notifying the other participants. Texas Penal Code 516 or 02. That week, I caught Ron on tape again, this time whispering to another board member about talking to a buddy in city permits to shut down Mercer's driveway expansion. I smiled hearing that. My driveway expansion was already permitted, inspected, and closed. He was grasping at air. But he didn't stop. He filed an online complaint with the county development office accusing me of grading without erosion control. The inspector showed up, looked around, and shook his head. "You've got all your silt fences, good compaction, permits clean. Honestly, these reports are starting to look harassing." I handed him coffee and said, "Would you mind making a note of that?" He did. Signed and dated, July 12th, 9:26 a.m. That note became another tab in the binder, right behind harassment incidents, Exhibit H. By then, I knew exactly how to end this, but I needed witnesses, people who'd seen both sides and could testify without bias. Janelle recruited two, Mr. Patel, a retired engineer, and Carmen Lopez, who ran the local feed store. Both homeowners, both fed up. We met under the carport one humid evening, cicadas buzzing loud enough to drown our voices. I laid out my plan on a clipboard, one page, no fluff. Victor looked over it, nodded once. "You realize this could turn the HOA inside out, right?" "That's the point," I said. He grinned. "Then let's pick the date." The next HOA quarterly meeting was scheduled for July 21st at 7 o'clock p.m. Agenda item number 3, discussion of enforcement procedures. That was my opening, my stage, my lawful public set piece. I circled the date in red ink on the calendar. That's where we flipped the switch. July 21st came hotter than asphalt on a blacktop. 98 degrees, no wind, the kind of Texas heat that melts patience into tar. The HOA clubhouse sat like a polished barn, white siding, fake shutters, flagpole rattling from distant thunder. I parked right up front, binder under my arm, camera pen clipped to my shirt pocket, blinking red. Inside, folding chairs were packed. 40 homeowners, most angry but unsure who to aim at. Ron stood up front in his yellow shirt, fanning himself with the printed agenda. He started talking before I even sat down. Item 3, he said. Mercer property non-compliance, continued violations, interference with community utilities. I move to authorize legal escalation and board council engagement. I raised my hand. Point of order. He frowned. "You're not recognized. Actually, I am. Section 2.7 of your bylaws requires open comment before any enforcement vote." He slammed the folder shut. "Fine. 2 minutes." That was all I needed. I stepped up, laid my binder on the table and said, "Before you vote, you should probably know your association filed its corporate status as delinquent with the state for 247 days, meaning none of your actions since December are legally binding." A murmur rippled through the crowd. I opened the binder, slid out the printed state record, the one stamped June 30th, entity status, forfeited rights. Ron's face flushed. That's being corrected. Not before you filed 3 fraudulent liens, Ron, I said. And not before you trespassed on a parcel you don't own. He scoffed. That's absurd. The developer deeded. I cut him off, pulling the second document from the binder. The developer's estate never completed the transfer. Parcel 18B is owned by Westline Holdings, LLC. People craned their necks. Who's that? Someone asked. I smiled slightly. That would be me. Gasps scattered like gravel under tires. Ron tried to talk, but I kept going. And when you cut my lock on July 5th, you committed criminal trespass. Deputy Morales documented it. Case number 24 to 1907. Also, your insurance carrier, Heritage Mutual, policy 4217B, requires disclosure of any criminal investigations within 24 hours. You didn't file that notice, did you? Ron's hand trembled. You don't know what you're talking about. Victor stood at the back, arms folded, voice steady. Actually, he does. I'm his counsel. A few people clapped softly. Then came the click, the unmistakable sound of a body cam activating. Deputy Morales stepped forward from the doorway, uniform crisp, saying, I'm here per request of the county ombudsman to observe this meeting as a neutral authority. The crowd went still. Ron barked, This is a private association. Morales replied, You forfeited your corporate rights. Until reinstated, you operate under General Property Code, which makes this meeting open to any affected resident. That was the moment, the lawful confirmation. Visual beat number 2. Morales' badge glinting under fluorescent light, his hand steady on his clipboard while the board realized they weren't the law anymore. Ron slumped into his chair. The treasurer, a thin man with sweat-darkened sleeves, whispered, What do we do? You listen, I said, and maybe you vote to fix this before someone ends up in court. The meeting went downhill fast. Half the homeowners demanded transparency. One woman shouted, My sprinklers were out for 2 days because of his mess, pointing at Ron. He snapped, It was sabotage. I raised a finger. No, it was inspection. And here's the invoice. I pulled a printed form showing $100 for maintenance on July 4th, signed, stamped, paid. Every action documented, every minute logged. Victor leaned for, Ward, voice calm. My client will accept a full cease and desist of enforcement actions, written acknowledgement of improper lien filings, and reimbursement of his documented costs. In exchange, he won't pursue civil damages. Ron glared. And if we refuse? Victor nodded toward Morales. Then I suppose the DA's office gets a copy of the impersonation report and trespass footage. Your choice. The board voted. 4 yes, 3 abstain, 2 walked out. Motion passed. For the first time in months, I exhaled. After the meeting, a few neighbors came up, apologetic. Carmen Lopez patted my arm. You did what all of us wanted to, but were scared to start. I just nodded. We're not done yet. Because I wasn't. The cease and desist was only step 1. What I really wanted was reform, something permanent. But that night, back at the ranch, I finally felt the noise quiet. Dana sat on the porch swing, barefoot, holding Lily's hand. Clover bleated softly behind the fence. Was it worth it? Dana asked. I thought about all the paper, the hours, the fear. Ask me after they sign the deal, I said. She smiled faintly. You're really going to make them change the rules? Not just the rules, I said. The structure. That's when my phone buzzed again. An unknown number, voicemail transcription appearing on screen. This isn't over, Mercer. You think you won? Watch your gate. I stared at it until the sun went down, then pressed Save Evidence and backed it up to the cloud. The fight wasn't over. It was just about to shift from defense to reform. Before we go there, let me ask, how should HOA officials who trespass or harass be punished? Probation? Removal? Criminal fines? What precedent would make you feel justice was real? Drop your thoughts below. Let's set a standard together. That night I barely slept. Every shadow outside the window looked like headlights slowing near a gate. Every crunch of gravel made me reach for my phone. But when the sun rose, the fear burned off with the mist. I was done hiding. This was the day I'd pushed the first domino. At 8:12 a.m., Victor met me at the diner on Highway 380. He looked rough, coffee stains on his cuff, phone buzzing nonstop. "They hired counsel," he said between bites of toast. "Some HOA firm out of Dallas. Big mouths, small ethics." "Let them come," I said. "I've got something they don't." He smirked. "The valve?" "The valve and the deed," I said. "But more than that, timing." I showed him a printed notice. Public Works, Annual Maintenance, July 22, 23. Scheduled power test across subdivision lines. The city would be running a standard outage test, meaning the HOA's clubhouse generator, hooked through my utility easement, would kick on automatically. That system hadn't been inspected in 2 years, and since I now owned the easement, I had legal authority to request an inspection. "Do it," Victor said, "but file it formally." So I did. I submitted a certified notice of inspection to both the HOA and county. Copies went to the insurance carrier, Heritage Mutual. By 2:00 p.m., the notice was public record. That night, the board held a closed strategy session at the clubhouse, without realizing their power feed ran through my parcel. At 7:47 p.m., I flipped the breaker for maintenance, exactly as permitted. The clubhouse went dark mid-meeting. I stood there under the stars, listening to the distant sound of raised voices and the thump of chairs. The hum of the generator started, sputtered, then died. The fuel line clogged with years of unreported corrosion. Janelle texted me from inside. "They're panicking. Ron just called 911 claiming sabotage." I replied, "Tell them to check the permit logs." Minutes later, 2 sheriff's cruisers rolled up. Morales again. He walked over to me, flashlight cutting through the dust. "You conducting maintenance, Mr. Mercer?" "Yes, sir," I said, handing him the papers. "Filed yesterday, certified and time-stamped." He read it, nodded, and then radioed back. "All lawful. Tell dispatch to clear it." Visual beat number 1 already felt like history. This was the moment the scales tipped for good. The next morning, the HOA's insurer called Victor. "We've received multiple claims for power outage liability," the agent said. "Our review indicates the HOA was operating without valid corporate status at the time of loss. We are freezing coverage pending investigation." In less than 24 hours, their safety net disappeared. Now the calls started coming. Not threats this time, but apologies. One board member, Mrs. Landry, left a message sobbing. "I didn't know Ron never renewed our registration. Please, can we meet?" I met her the next day at the coffee shop. She was nervous, clutching a manila folder. Inside were internal emails, Ron instructing the treasurer to backdate filings and keep Mercer out of quorum votes. Smoking gun, printed and dated. She whispered, "I can't do this anymore. I'll testify." "Then you're going to help fix it," I said. That night, Victor drafted a settlement outline, what would later become reversal number 2. But we kept it close. I wanted the board to come begging, not bargaining. Before that could happen, though, Ron made one last move. On July 24th, I found 2 county code officers at my gate, clipboard in hand. "Anonymous report about unpermitted structures," one said apologetically. I showed them the permits. Signed, inspected, passed. They laughed. "We figured. He's been calling us twice a day. Don't worry. We're filing this as false report." That was the final straw for me. Not anger, but certainty. Ron wasn't just reckless. He was self-destructing. That evening, I stood in the yard with Dana and Lily watching fireflies. Lily asked, "Daddy, are the mean people gone?" I knelt beside her. "Not yet, but they're almost out of power." She giggled, not getting the metaphor. But I did. Every cable, every pipe, every line they depended on ran through my dirt. They'd built their little empire on land they didn't own. And now, as the next HOA meeting approached, this time under county supervision, they were walking straight into the sting that would rewrite our community for good. Before we roll into that showdown, tell me honestly, when an HOA crosses from order into obsession, do you think homeowners should fight with lawyers or with leverage? If it were you, what would you buy, document, or expose first? Comment below. I'm curious what kind of leverage you'd pick. The next HOA meeting was held under new circumstances. County officials required the presence of a neutral ombudsman after the blackout incident, which meant this was no longer a backroom affair. Word spread fast. Neighbors who'd avoided meetings for years filled every chair. Even local reporters showed up with handheld cameras. The air was thick with July humidity and tension. Dana squeezed my hand before I went inside. "Be careful," she whispered. "I'm past careful," I said. "I'm finishing this." Ron was already at the podium, sweating under the fluorescent lights. He tried for authority but sounded frayed. "We're here tonight to address the malicious interference and defamation that's damaged this community." The ombudsman, a calm woman in a navy suit named Ms. Alvarez, raised her hand. "Let's remember, Mr. Bixby, we're also here to verify compliance with county orders and insurance requirements. Please keep remarks factual." I sat front row, binder open, recorder running. He gestured toward me. "This homeowner, Mr. Mercer, has made it impossible to govern. He's endangered public safety by tampering with our utilities." I stood. "Correction, I own the utilities right of way. Every action I took was authorized, recorded, and filed." He smirked. "You think some loophole deed makes you above the board?" Ms. Alvarez turned to him. "Mr. Bixby, our office verified that the easement was never transferred to your association. Mr. Mercer's ownership stands." The room erupted in murmurs. I stepped forward, voice steady. "And while we're on facts, here's your board's correspondence instructing members to falsify filings." I handed her the manila folder from Mrs. Landry, dated, signed, and authenticated. Ron snatched at the air as if he could undo paper with gesture. "Those are private communications." "They're public now," I said. "Under Texas Business Organizations Code, 522.351, any member may inspect corporate records during forfeiture proceedings." Alvarez flipped through the pages, then looked up. "These are serious breaches. You'll want counsel, Mr. Bixby." That's when the door opened, and two plainclothes officers entered quietly. One whispered to Alvarez. She nodded. She announced, "Mr. Bixby, the Denton County Sheriff's Office has an active inquiry regarding impersonation and falsified filings. You're not under arrest, but you are advised not to leave the premises until you've spoken with investigators." The entire room went dead silent. Visual beat number 2 seared into memory. Ron's face draining white as a deputy stepped beside him, badge reflecting off the podium's glass. Someone in the back whispered, "Guess the HOA just got HOA'd." Victor leaned against the wall, arms crossed, expression unreadable. "Told you rope hangs itself," he murmured. I looked at the homeowners, people who'd been fined for grass height, for porch swings, for flower colors, and saw relief crack through disbelief. Alvarez cleared her throat. "Effective immediately, this HOA's authority is suspended pending compliance review. A temporary committee will oversee essential functions." Ron muttered, "You can't just take our power." I said, "Power was never yours. It belongs to the people living here." Applause broke out. Awkward, hesitant, then swelling like thunder. But I didn't smile. I knew the fight wasn't over. They'd fall, yes, but the structure that allowed it needed rewriting, not revenge. That was reversal number 2. After the meeting, I walked outside into the thick night air. Reporters were waiting by the steps. A camera light flared. "Mr. Mercer, what's next for the community?" I said, "We build something better, transparent, limited, accountable, and we make sure no one's kid loses a pet because a few people liked control more than decency." The next morning's headlines told the story. Denton HOA board suspended after utility deed scandal. Local dad sparks accountability push. But the real work started after the cameras left. Before we close in on the reform deal and aftermath, weigh in. What reform would you demand first? Term limits for board members, open records access, or audit requirements? Comment your pick. I'm collecting what real people would want if this were their community. The next 72 hours felt like the dust after a storm. Quiet, but charged. County officials sealed the HOA office, the insurer froze all claims, and Ron's resignation letter hit my inbox before dawn. I didn't open it right away. Instead, I poured coffee, stood on the porch, and listened to the soft bleating of clover and the hum of sprinklers coming back to life. By mid-morning, Ms. Alvarez called. "Mr. Mercer, "The county will be appointing an interim board," she said. "They'd like you involved. Community liaison, not enforcement." I laughed softly. "After all this, you still want me near bylaws?" She smiled through the phone. "That's exactly why. People trust the one who fought fair." Later that afternoon, the homeowners met in the same clubhouse that had once been a stage for threats. Only this time, the air felt different. Windows open, sunlight spilling across folding tables. Victor was there, Janelle too, and half the neighbors. Brought homemade snacks. No agenda, no fines, no fear. I stood up and read from a single page titled Community Reform Charter, our reversal number 2. It wasn't vengeance, it was architecture. Term limits, 2 years, max 1 re-election. Mandatory public audits every fiscal cycle. No closed meetings. Fee increases require 70% homeowner approval. And most important, every document, every vote, every rule published online, free to access. Someone asked, "What about you, Caleb? You running for the new board?" I shook my head. "No, I've had enough titles for one lifetime. I'll serve as oversight advisor, but it's time the community owns itself." They voted. Unanimous. Papers signed, stamped, filed with the county that very evening. Visual beat number 3 etched forever. A stack of signed pages laid beneath the warm beam of the meeting room lamp, binder rings clicking shut, the same sound that once meant war now closing on peace. A week later, the sheriff's office announced misdemeanor charges against Ron for filing false documents and criminal impersonation. 2 other board members accepted deferred adjudication. Heritage Mutual terminated the HOA's old policy and issued a new one under the interim board's name, this time with strict compliance clauses. News outlets ran follow-ups. New HOA charter passes transparency reforms. Residents celebrate civic win. Dana watched the segment with a smile that finally looked real. "You did it," she said. I shook my head. "We did it. The system worked, once we made it remember who it's supposed to serve." That night, Lily and I built a small wooden sign at the fence line. She painted the letters herself, crooked but proud, Echo Ranch, home of the free goat. I hammered it into the dirt, looked out at the horizon, and thought about my dad. He'd have liked the irony. Justice served not by rage, but by record-keeping. For those of you still watching, if you believe I fought the right way, and that this is how it should end, say a few words in the comments for your friend or neighbor who's fighting their own HOA battle. Subscribe so future stories reach you first. And as responsible citizens, share this one so others learn that law, patience, and proof still matter. That's on us. After everything settled, life got quieter. Clover grew into a small, stubborn reminder that rules without empathy aren't worth the paper they're printed on. The new board held its first open-day picnic. Kids running through sprinklers, volunteers painting benches, Janelle lecturing on filing fees between bites of pie. A local paper printed one last quote from me, small and neat beneath the photo of our community sign. They tried to take my daughter's goat. Instead, we took back our rights. Then I closed the binder, slid it onto the shelf beside the family Bible, and whispered the same words I'd told Victor on the day it began. Next case will be easier.